There is a job in Britain that nobody votes for and almost nobody can name. The person holding it decides what the king reads, who reaches him, and which crisis lands on his desk first. In October 2023, the man doing that job for Prince William walked out. 2 days ago, the man doing it for King Charles announced he is going too. Neither was a scandal. Both tell you something the palace would rather you did not notice. The role is called Private Secretary, and the office has existed since 1805. In plain terms, the Private Secretary is the channel between the monarch and the governments of Britain and the Commonwealth realms. He controls the diary. He shapes the words. He decides which letters get answered and which quietly do not. It has been called the most powerful unelected position in the country, and the people who have held it are almost entirely unknown outside Westminster. For 2 centuries, the structure was simple. Each senior royal had a private secretary, and everyone in that household answered to him. It was hierarchy in its purest form, and it survived world wars and abdication, and the end of an empire. Then, in the autumn of 2023, the Prince and Princess of Wales placed a job advertisement that quietly proposed to dismantle it. Within weeks, William's closest aide was gone. The man was Jean-Christophe Gray, known inside the palace simply as JC. He was not a courtier by background. He was a Treasury civil servant who had run general expenditure policy, then spent 3 years as David Cameron's official spokesman in Downing Street. He had worked for Alistair Darling and for George Osborne. Oxford, then the London School of Economics. He arrived at Kensington Palace in February 2021, on secondment from Whitehall. By any measure, he was good at it. Gray guided William through the largest transition of his adult life, the move from Duke of Cambridge to Prince of Wales after the death of Queen Elizabeth. There is a neat detail buried in that handover. When Charles became king, his own private secretary moved with him to Buckingham Palace, and the title he vacated, Principal Private Secretary to the Prince of Wales, passed directly to Gray. Remember that, because the 2 men are about to end up in the same story twice. Gray advised on the Earthshot Prize. He advised on Homewards, William's programme to end homelessness. The Times described him as widely respected and, in a phrase that would soon look pointed, as William's closest aide. Then, in September 2023, an advertisement appeared. The Prince and Princess of Wales were hiring a chief executive, not a private secretary. A chief executive to run a household of roughly 60 people. The advert asked for someone emotionally intelligent, with low ego and real self-awareness. It described the ideal candidate as a servant leader. And buried in the detail was the line that actually mattered. The new chief executive would report directly to William and Catherine, not through the private secretary. Around him, a royal insider told the Daily Mail it was a revolutionary move and that it had set the cat among the pigeons. 3 weeks later, Jean-Christophe Gray announced he was leaving. The official explanation was simple and entirely plausible. Gray was on secondment. He had always intended to return to government. Royal sources confirmed it. He would go in the spring, and there was no drama in it at all. Almost nobody in royal circles believed that was the whole story. Roya Nicker, the royal correspondent who broke it for the Times, connected the 2 events in the same breath. The couple were restructuring their household, and their private secretary was parting company with them. A source was blunter. Having a chief executive placed above you, the source said, is not an optimal job scenario when your title is no longer head of the household. That same month, Kensington Palace had also hired a chief operating officer, Sean Carney, who arrived from Telemus Capital, a private investment firm. And the chief executive vacancy had been posted publicly, online, like any other corporate job. For a royal household, that alone was close to unprecedented. These posts had always been filled by a quiet word in the right ear. The vocabulary tells you everything. A royal household was being reorganized into a company. And here is where it stops being one man's career decision. Because Gray was not an outlier. He was part of a pattern that had been running for decades. His own predecessor, Christian Jones, lasted 10 months before leaving for a partnership at a private equity firm. Jones's predecessor, Simon Case, left Kensington Palace to run the entire British civil service. Go back further, and it gets stranger. In 2017, Sir Christopher Geidt, the Queen's private secretary and one of the most trusted courtiers of the modern era, was forced out after complaints from Prince Charles and the Duke of York. It was the first time the Queen had ever lost a private secretary that way, and reporting at the time linked it to a plan inside Charles's household to accelerate his role, known in some circles as Project 70. Geidt's removal mattered because he was not a functionary. He had steered the Queen through the Diamond Jubilee and much of the quiet constitutional groundwork for the transition still to come. Losing him was read across Whitehall as a signal that the balance of power between Buckingham Palace and Clarence House had already shifted, years before anyone was willing to say so out loud. And in 1990, Major General Sir Christopher Airy lasted less than a year as Charles's private secretary before he was gone. Airy came from the army, a decorated officer with no experience of the strange half-political, half-charitable world Charles was building around himself. He died in April 2025, and his appointment is still cited as the case study in how badly the fit can go wrong. The journalist Valentine Lowe spent years documenting all of this in his book, Courtiers: The Hidden Power Behind the Crown. His reporting on the Airy period is unsparing. One insider told Lowe that Airy had never grasped the differences between the prince's various organizations, and that Charles must have been miserable. That is the thing about this job. It is not just senior, it is intimate. The royal author Ingrid Seward has described working in that kind of proximity to Charles as all-consuming. And the power attached to it is not only symbolic. King Charles's principal private secretary sits on RAVEC, the Home Office committee that decides which public figures receive Metropolitan Police protection. That is the same committee at the centre of Prince Harry's long legal fight over his security in Britain. Harry argued in the British courts that the committee had treated him unfairly after he stepped back from royal duties, and he lost. In his memoir, Harry gave 3 senior palace aides insect nicknames, and reporting identified the King's principal private secretary as the Wasp. His name is Sir Clive Alderton, and on Monday he resigned. Alderton told royal household staff he is stepping down after 20 years with the royal family, 11 of them as principal private secretary, first to Charles and Camilla as Prince and Princess of Wales, then to the King and Queen after the accession. He is the 25th holder of an office created in 1805. There was an unusual arrangement in the months that followed the accession. For nearly a year, 2 men held the post of private secretary to the sovereign at the same time. Alderton, Charles's man, served alongside Sir Edward Young, who had been the Queen's. It was a joint tenure designed to carry the institution across the handover without dropping anything. Young stepped away in 2023 and took a seat in the House of Lords. In his message, he called it the greatest imaginable honour and said his support would continue, in a less formal capacity, for the rest of his life. A palace spokesperson said the King and Queen are deeply grateful for his loyalty and his counsel. He will step aside around his 60th birthday next May, with a handover running into the summer of 2027. His tenure covered almost every difficult thing the modern monarchy has faced. He prepared Charles for the accession. He ran the household through the death of Queen Elizabeth and through the coronation. He handled the departure of the Sussexes and the fallout around Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And then there is the detail almost everyone missed. Buckingham Palace announced it will run an open recruitment process to replace him. External candidates as well as internal ones. Private sector as well as public. Consider what that actually means. The most sensitive position in the British constitutional system, a job historically filled by a quiet tap on the shoulder inside a closed world of courtiers and diplomats, is going out to open competition. Meanwhile, at Kensington Palace, William's revolution had already stalled. The chief executive role, the one that triggered Gray's departure, was quietly shelved. By May 2024, the Princess of Wales's cancer diagnosis and the fallout from an edited family photograph had consumed the household. A spokesman said the focus was on her recovery and that no appointment had been made. William hired a new private secretary, Ian Patrick, and the 200-year-old structure simply held. So the job survived. For now. But between a shelved restructure at one palace and an open advertisement at the other, the most powerful unelected role in Britain is being rebuilt in public for the first time in 2 centuries. Whoever wins it will help shape a reign, and almost nobody watching will ever learn their name. If you found this fascinating, hit subscribe for more stories from behind the palace walls.